You never understood me, Claire. Those were the last words my son Max said to me on the day my divorce was finalized. I leaned against the doorframe and listened to his footsteps disappear around the stairwell. The smell of the hastily cooked dinner still hung in the air, mixed with a hard, tight anger. Greg and I stood in silence. Max was only 14, but he spoke like a grown man, pushing me to the edge with his look and words. My name is Claire Donovan. I'm 50. 8 years ago, my marriage to Greg collapsed completely. It didn't just take our house or savings, it took my child. Max chose his father that night and cut off all contact with me. He blocked my number, ignored my calls, my emails, even holiday cards. Every attempt I made felt like throwing stones into the ocean. I remember that night clearly. Greg, in his dark suit, tossed the divorce papers onto the table. Sign, Claire. This is what you deserve, he said with a sneer. Watching Max walk away, I felt utterly erased. 20 years of marriage, 20 years of giving, declared void in a single evening. I packed up our home, turned my son's room into a guest room, and every item of his clothing felt like a mockery of my role as his mother. After the divorce, I rebuilt my life alone. I work as a nurse, pulling shifts that leave almost no time for sleep. I moved into a small apartment in the suburbs. Greg called occasionally, not to comfort, but to check financial details. I balanced bills and hospital shifts, but I never stopped caring for Max. Even when he wouldn't take my calls, I would quietly leave the comics he loved at his doorstep. One winter my mother died. I drove to the funeral alone, gripping the old keychain she left behind. The snow fell heavy, headlights carved through the night. Standing in that crowd, the loneliness I felt wasn't just grief, it was the weight of having lost every home warmth. Max didn't come. Greg only nodded. In the snow I decided I would not be easily hurt again. Those next years I poured myself into work. Night shifts taught me calm and decisiveness. I rose from a regular nurse to the emergency department head. In the wards I was dependable, with patients I was nearly untouchable. But beneath competence, I kept a quiet plan. I would not let the person who rejected me remain unchallenged. In those years I built a wall around myself. Max refused calls. Greg's casual sneers reminded me daily that I had been erased. Once, as I trudged through the hospital parking lot with my duffel, Greg called. Cold voice, how long can you keep this up? Look at your life, even your child isn't with you. My keys slipped from my hand. I bent to pick them up, staring into the night light's hard glare, and only sighed. He had never seen me, never respected me. At work, pressure was constant. Seconds are fights between life and death, you must be calm. Early on, colleagues would jab, Claire, how can you not handle this? Are you fit to be a nurse? Those barbs stung, but I recorded them internally. I learned patience is not weakness, it's power accumulation. I remember Max's high school graduation comment, Mom, you were never really my support. That cut deep. I had stayed up nights helping with homework, driven him to club meetings, arranged birthday surprises. His smiles used to sustain me. Now they were replaced with sarcasm. From then on I learned two things: no one will automatically value you, and only by building real capability can you prevent being stomped on. I took night classes in finance and management, learned contracts, studied investments. If I couldn't change how my son and ex saw me, I would make myself undeniable. Years passed. I started a private home care business, in-home nursing for the elderly and ill. At first it was a few clients and thin income, but I insisted on meticulous care, turning bedridden patients, rehabilitation exercises for stroke survivors, comprehensive notes. I mastered small details and that grew into controlling the whole. The company grew modestly. I hired 3 employees, my monthly income covered life. Financial independence became a shield, and a tool to plan a measured revenge. But money alone wasn't enough. Real power came from insight and careful accumulation. I documented every scrap after the divorce, Greg's investment habits, his business vulnerabilities, his vanity, and how Max mirrored his father's thinking. I recorded fights, saved the ignored messages, logged every moment I'd been isolated. These files became ammunition, quietly stacked in my mind in folders. I recall Greg once inviting me to a family get-together. "Just family chat, don't be nervous," he said. I stood before the mirror, adjusted my hair and clothes, and thought, this time I will not be the mocked one. When I arrived, Max stood in the living room, 17 now, with his father's features and a cold distance I remembered. I slipped a folder into my bag like a weapon and entered with calm. From that day, I began to collect Greg's financial records and watch his corporate moves. I didn't confront him directly. I worked like a hunter, quietly probing his partners. I fed anonymous tips to his business associates, sowing doubt about his integrity. I filed anonymous complaints inside his company to prompt internal audits. I maintained my outward composure, occasionally speaking with Max in a gentle voice so nothing would hint at my plan. Patience turned into opportunity. When the evidence was complete, I walked into a board meeting and presented Greg's violations to the whole room. His face moved from surprise to panic, sweat ran down his temples. Max sat across, watching his father go from commanding presence to a frightened man. In that flicker of panic I saw Max begin to doubt his earlier judgments. Greg tried to plead, "Claire, what are you doing? Are you insane?" My smile was slight, voice cold and precise. "I'm just letting the truth show itself." "You brought this on yourself." He begged, even knelt, pleading not to be ruined, not to ruin Max. I watched his shaking hands and the pale fear on his face and said, "You must bear what you should have borne long ago." The room fell silent, only Greg's terror and Max's conflicted gaze moved in the air. Days later Greg was forced to sell off company shares and lost almost everything. Max approached me silently and finally whispered, "I never expected you to be this strong." I nodded once. "Strength isn't to hurt you," I said. "It's to protect myself from being trampled." Tears welled in Max's eyes. He didn't ask to reconcile, but he finally, quietly, understood the depth of my years of neglect. Back in my quiet apartment, holding my mother's old keychain, the curtains swayed with the breeze. Max had left. Greg had fallen. But I didn't feel triumph. What I felt was an unprecedented calm. I no longer needed anyone's approval. The lamp cast light on the floor. I smiled, knowing I was free. Revenge wasn't spectacle. It was proof that my worth had never been erased.